The distress call. Word count, 1032. The exploration vessel Zephyr cruised through the void of interstellar space, its fusion engines propelling it toward the uncharted frontier of the galaxy. Captain Nora Vance stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic star charts floating before her. She had dedicated her life to this mission of discovery, eager to make first contact with the alien civilizations that surely shared the cosmos with humanity. A sudden ping from the communications array snapped Nora out of her reverie. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call," Lieutenant Zora Mikhailov reported from her station. "It's not from any known human frequency." Nora's heart raced at the implications. "Put it on screen," she ordered, turning to face the main view screen. The screen wavered and resolved into the image of an alien being, its lithe frame draped in shimmering robes. Large, almond-shaped eyes blinked slowly as it spoke in a lyrical language, the ship's translation matrix quickly interpreting the words. "To any who receive this message, I am Ambassador Kel'Lizor of the Cortex Confederation. Our worlds are under attack by the ruthless Krovax Empire, which seeks to subjugate and enslave us. We are a peaceful people, unaccustomed to war. Without aid, we will surely fall. We beseech any civilizations receiving this message to help us in our time of need." The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence on the bridge. Nora gripped the back of her chair, her mind racing. Starfleet protocol was clear. The Zephyr was an exploration vessel, not equipped for combat. Engaging in an alien war was strictly forbidden. Yet how could they turn their backs on a civilization in need? "Lieutenant Mikhailov, what's our ETA to the origin of that transmission?" Nora asked. "At maximum warp, 26 hours, Captain," Zara replied after a quick calculation. Nora nodded, her decision made. "Helm, lay in a course. We're going to answer that call." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the bridge crew. "But Captain," Commander Zhang Lai, her first officer, said carefully, "Starfleet Command's orders were clear. We're to avoid any entanglements with alien civilizations, especially conflicts." "I'm aware of our orders, Commander," Nora said, meeting his gaze. "But Starfleet also tasked us with making contact with new civilizations, fostering peace and cooperation. If we turn our backs on the Cortex now, what does that say about us as a people?" Zhang held her gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Understood, Captain. I'll alert the crew to prepare for potential hostile engagement." "Very good," Nora said. She turned back to the view screen, watching the stars blur as the Zephyr leaped to warp. She knew they were heading into the unknown, but the chance to help a civilization in need, to show the galaxy what humanity stood for, that was worth any risk. As the Zephyr raced toward Cortex space, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would define her captaincy, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. In the face of an overwhelming enemy, would they rise to the challenge or retreat to the safety of isolation? She knew in her heart there was only one choice. No matter the odds, they had to try. The galaxy was watching, and she would not let them down. Arrival at Cortex Prime. Word count, 1018. The Zephyr dropped out of warp at the edge of the Cortex system, its sensors immediately bombarded with the telltale signs of a civilization under siege. The once verdant planet of Cortex Prime, heart of the Confederation, was shrouded in the acrid smoke of orbital bombardment. The graceful curves of Cortex cities lay in ruins, shattered by the relentless assault of the Krovax war machine. And above it all, the Krovax fleet hung in space like a swarm of angry wasps. Dozens of jagged blade-like battleships surrounded the planet, pouring down fire on the helpless populations below. Smaller attack craft darted through the debris fields of destroyed Cortex defense platforms, hunting down any ships that tried to escape the carnage. "My God," Zhang breathed, horror etched on his face as he took in the scene. "We're too late." Nora clenched her jaw, refusing to accept defeat. "Not yet. We're not," she said firmly. "Scan the planet. Find me the Cortex leadership, anyone we can contact." The bridge crew leaped into action, hands flying over consoles as they scoured the planet for signs of life. "I've got something," Ensign Taro Seto called out. "A fortified bunker complex under the capital city. Cortex life signs inside, but they're weak. They won't hold out much longer under this bombardment." Nora nodded sharply. "Hail them." The view screen wavered, then stabilized on the image of a Cortex in ornate robes, its face lined with grief and exhaustion. "I am Consul Zephyrin," it said wearily. "Are you the aid we requested?" "I'm Captain Nora Vance of the Earthship Zephyr," Nora replied. "We're here to help in any way we can. What's your status?" Zephyrin's shoulders slumped. "Dire, Captain. Our defenses are all but crushed. The Krovax will land their ground forces within hours to wipe out any survivors and seize control of our planet. We cannot hold against them." Nora leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Consul, I know we're just one ship, but we're not without capabilities. If we can draw the Krovax fleet away from the planet, even for a short time, could your people evacuate? Get to safety?" Zephyrin blinked in surprise. "Perhaps, but you would be vastly outmatched. The Krovax would destroy you." "Let us worry about that," Nora said with a tight smile. "We're not afraid of long odds. Transmit your civilian evacuation coordinates to us. We'll buy you as much time as we can." The consul hesitated, then bowed its head in gratitude. "You offer us a chance we thought lost, Captain. We will not waste it. May the light of the cosmos guide your path." As the transmission ended, Nora turned to her crew, seeing the determined looks on their faces. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. "Red alert," she called out. "All hands to battle stations. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity is made of." The Zephyr's hull shimmered as its advanced stealth field engaged, masking it from enemy sensors. Nora settled into her command chair, adrenaline surging through her veins. This was the moment they had trained for, the reason they had ventured to the stars. Not for conquest or glory, but to stand as a beacon of hope in the darkness. "Helm, lay in an intercept course for the nearest Krovax warship," she ordered. "Weapons, arm the nanobot swarm missiles and the graviton torpedoes. Engineering, divert all power to shields and engines." As the crew chores their acknowledgement, Nora allowed herself a small smile. The Krovax thought themselves the apex predators of the galaxy, unmatched in their might. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Humanity had not come this far to back down from a fight. They would stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. The Zephyr knifed through space, screaming toward the Krovax fleet, like an avenging angel of old Earth legends. Nora's smile widened into a fierce grin. "All right, you bastards," she murmured. "Let's dance." Holding the line. Word count, 1102. The Zephyr shuddered as a barrage of plasma blasts slammed into its shields, the deck bucking beneath Nora's feet. Sparks rained down from overloaded consoles, the acrid scent of burnt circuitry filling the air. On the view screen, the massive bulk of a Krovax battleship loomed, its spined hull bristling with gun batteries that poured sheets of fire at the comparatively tiny human vessel. "Shields down to 60%. Mikhailov yelled over the chaos. "We can't take much more of this, Captain." Nora gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white. "Steady," she called out, her voice cutting through the din. "Helm, keep us in their blind spot. Tactical, arm the chronoton torpedoes. Target their engine core." The Zephyr twisted like a gymnast, evading another withering salvo as it darted beneath the Krovax ship's belly. The human vessel's advanced weapon systems locked on, and a volley of shimmering blue torpedoes streaked from its launchers. They slipped through the battleship's shields as if they weren't there, phasing through the hull to detonate directly inside the engine chamber. The result was spectacular. The Krovax ship seemed to bulge outward for a moment, its structure wavering like a mirage. Then, with a flash of light that seared the retinas, it simply vanished, leaving only a rapidly dissipating cloud of exotic particles. "Temporal core containment failure," Jang reported with grim satisfaction. They've been scattered across the fourth dimension. A ragged cheer went up from the Zephyr's crew, but Nora quelled it with a raised hand. No time to celebrate, she warned. That's just one down. We've got a whole fleet to deal with. And indeed, the Krovaks were quick to react. A dozen more battleships veered toward the Zephyr, their spined hulls glowing with the buildup of weapon charges. Swarms of needle-like attack craft raced ahead of them, peppering the human ship with vicious strafing runs. Nora clenched her jaw as the Zephyr rocked under the onslaught, alarms blaring across the bridge. She knew they couldn't match the Krovaks in a straight-up slugging match. They had to be smarter, faster, more unconventional. Ensign Sato, activate the dimensional refraction field, she ordered. Taro's fingers danced over his console, and a shimmering aura enveloped the Zephyr. Suddenly, the ship seemed to split into a dozen mirror images, each one veering off in a different direction. The Krovaks' fire faltered, their targeting computers overwhelmed by the multiplying ghost signatures. Taking advantage of the confusion, the real Zephyr darted among the enemy formation, its weapons flashing. Chronoton torpedoes and graviton beams lashed out, exploiting weaknesses in Krovak shields that the human crew had painstakingly analyzed. Krovak ships reeled and died under the surgical strikes, their hulls crumpling like tin cans. But it couldn't last. The Krovaks adapted quickly, their battle network AI refocusing and redoubling its efforts. The Zephyr's phantom doubles winked out one by one as the enemy fire found its mark. Consoles on the bridge exploded in showers of sparks, crew members crying out as they were flung from their stations. Hull breach on decks 7 and 8. Zhang shouted over the chaos. Emergency force fields are holding, but we've got wounded down there. Nora closed her eyes for a brief moment, her heart aching for her crew. But she couldn't let herself be paralyzed by the losses. They all knew the risks when they signed up. The best way to honor the fallen was to see the mission through. Consul Zephyrin, what's the status of your evacuation? She hailed, praying the Cortex leader was still alive. To her relief, Zephyrin's face appeared on the cracked view screen, static lacing the image. Transports are launching now, Captain, the consul reported, its voice strained. We're gathering as many as we can, but we need more time. Nora nodded grimly, turning to her crew. You heard them. We hold the line, no matter the cost. We give those people a chance to live. That's what we're here for. Zhang met her gaze, blood trickling from a cut on his brow. To the end, Captain, he said softly. For Earth and humanity. For Earth and humanity, Nora echoed, a fire kindling in her eyes. The Zephyr might be battered, its hull breached, and its shields failing, but they were not beaten. Not while a single heart still beat on its decks. They would stand against the darkness, a candle against the endless night. For they were human, and they would not go quietly. The Krovaks counterattack. Word count, 10-12. The Zephyr shuddered like a wounded animal, its once gleaming hull pitted and scarred by the relentless Krovaks' onslaught. Nora clung to her command chair as the ship bucked beneath her, the inertial dampener struggling to compensate for the violent maneuvers. On the view screen, the serried ranks of the Krovaks' fleet filled the sky, a seemingly endless armada of jagged blade-like ships. Captain, we're losing structural integrity on the starboard nacelle. Ensign Sato reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. One more hit there, and we'll lose warp capability entirely. Nora gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They had bought precious time for the Cortex evacuation, drawing the fury of the Krovaks' fleet upon themselves. But now, with the civilian transports safely away, the full might of the enemy was focused on the Zephyr. And it was a might that threatened to crush them utterly. Mikhailov, what's the status of our Chronoton torpedoes? She asked, grasping for any weapon, any tactic that could turn the tide. The Russian woman shook her head grimly. Launchers are burned out, Captain. That last volley fused the targeting matrices. We'll need hours in space dock to fix them, if we even had space dock facilities. Nora pounded her fist on the armrest, frustration boiling in her gut. Every advantage they had gained, every clever trick and technological edge, the Krovacs had countered. They adapted with a speed that defied belief, their battle AI seeming to anticipate the Zephyr's every move. As if to punctuate the point, the ship rocked again as a plasma lance stabbed through its weakening shields, carving a molten gash along its flank. Consoles erupted in showers of sparks, crew members crying out as they were flung like ragdolls. "Hull breach on Deck 5. Jung shouted, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "Emergency force fields are holding, but we've got casualties. Medbay is overwhelmed." Nora closed her eyes for a moment, grief and anger warring in her heart. Each life lost under her command was a wound that would never fully heal, but she couldn't let herself be paralyzed by the pain. She had to find a way, had to save what remained of her crew. "Consul Zephyrin, are your people clear?" she asked hoarsely, dreading the answer. The Cortex leader's image wavered on the cracked view screen, static distorting its features. "The last transport is away, Captain," it confirmed, its voice heavy with emotion. "You have bought the survival of my species with your blood. We can never repay this debt." Nora shook her head. "No debt," she said firmly. "This is what we do. This is what humanity stands for." But even as she spoke the words, a cold reality settled in her gut. They had achieved their mission, but at a cost that threatened to be total. The Zephyr was crippled, its weapons depleted, its crew decimated. And still the Krovacs came on, relentless and implacable. "Captain, we're being hailed by the Krovacs flagship," Mikhailov reported, her voice tinged with dread. Nora straightened in her chair, ignoring the pain of her own injuries. On screen, the image that filled the viewer was out of a nightmare. A Krovax in ornate armor glared at her with pitiless compound eyes, its mantis-like mandibles clacking in what the translation matrix interpreted as laughter. "Human vessel, you have fought with surprising tenacity," it rasped, its voice the grating of metal on bone. "But your struggle is futile. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and you." The Quantum Gambit. Word count, 1034. Nora stared at the Krovacs commander on the view screen, her eyes hard as steel. Surrender? Hardly. The Zephyr might be battered, her crew worn and bloodied, but they were far from broken. They were human, and if there was one thing their tumultuous history had taught them, it was how to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. "Brave words," she said coldly, "but I think you'll find we're full of surprises." She cut the transmission with a slash of her hand, turning to her science officer. "Mikhailov, you said the Krovac shields adapt quickly. How fast are we talking?" The blonde woman frowned thoughtfully, her fingers flying over her console. "Incredibly fast, Captain. Their quantum computing cores seem to analyze and counteract any frequency or modulation we use within nanoseconds." Nora nodded slowly, an idea beginning to form. What if we hit them with something that can't be adapted to? Something that defies conventional physics? Mikhailov's eyes widened. The Zephyr's jump drive. It creates a localized warp in spacetime, essentially folding the fabric of reality to allow near-instantaneous travel. If we could create an inverted jump field and project it, it would pass right through their shields and hull. Nora finished, a grim smile touching her lips. They can't adapt to something that breaks the laws of the universe. Jiang leaned forward, his brow creased. "But Captain, the jump drive was never meant to be weaponized. The amount of power needed, the strain on the reactor, it could tear the ship apart." Nora met his gaze steadily. "I know the risks, Commander, but we're out of options. It's this or we die fighting a losing battle." She turned to Mikhailov. "How long to rig the drive?" The science officer chewed her lip. 20 minutes, give or take. I'll have to bypass a lot of safeties and jury-rig the field emitters." "Make it 10, Nora said firmly. "Jiang, Sato, keep the Krovacs busy. Evasive maneuvers, hit and fade attacks, whatever you can do to buy Mikhailov time." As the crew leaped to their tasks with desperate energy, Nora gripped the arms of her command chair, her heart pounding. This was it, their final gambit. Either it would work and save them all, or, well, at least they would go out in a blaze of glory, a fitting end for a ship named after the West Wind. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as the Zephyr danced and weaved through the Krovak's fire, its hull groaning under the strain. Nora's eyes flicked constantly to the readouts from engineering, watching the power levels climb into the red as Mikhailov and her team pushed the jump drive far beyond its limits. Finally, the science officer's voice crackled over the comm. "Jump field rigged and ready, Captain. But I can't guarantee how long it will hold. Once we fire." "Understood." Nora cut in. "All hands, brace for impact." She nodded to Sato, who typed in a rapid sequence. On the view screen, a shimmering distortion began to form off the Zephyr's bow, space-time warping and twisting in unnatural ways. It grew rapidly, a spiral of impossible colors and shapes that hurt the eye to look upon. The Krovak's fleet, sensing the buildup of strange energies, turned as one to face the Zephyr, their weapons charging to full power. On the flagship's bridge, the Krovak's commander hissed in confusion and dread, unable to comprehend what the humans were attempting. It understood a moment later as the jump field suddenly inverted and expanded, a wave of roiling quantum disruption expanding outward at impossible speeds. It passed through shields and hulls like they weren't there, reality itself unraveling in its wake. Krovak ships simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered across a dozen dimensions. Others warped and twisted into impossible shapes, their crews' screams echoing across frequencies that had no name. In the space of a heartbeat, the once mighty fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage and fading energy echoes. On the Zephyr's bridge, the crew watched in awe and horror as the power of their desperate weapon unfolded. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring as the reactor strained to control the unleashed forces. Nora gripped her chair until her knuckles turned white, praying to any gods that might listen that Mikhailov's jury-rigging would hold. After an eternity, the jump field dissipated, leaving a silence so profound it was almost a physical thing. The Zephyr drifted in the midst of the Krovak's graveyard, its hull scorched and battered, but intact. They had done it. Against all odds, they had prevailed. A cheer went up from the crew, a sound of pure exultation and relief. They had stared into the face of annihilation and emerged victorious, testament to the indomitable human spirit. But Nora felt no elation, only a grim satisfaction and a bone-deep weariness. They had won, yes, but the cost had been high, too high. As she surveyed her bridge, taking in the empty chairs and blood-stained consoles, she silently vowed that this would not be the end of the story. The Zephyr and her crew had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Now they had to ensure that sacrifice meant something. The war was far from over, but for today, for this moment, they could breathe. They could mourn their dead, tend their wounds, and prepare for the struggles to come. For they were human, and they would not rest until the galaxy knew peace. Turning the tide. Word count, 1008. In the aftermath of the Zephyr's stunning victory, a strange quiet settled over the Cortex system. The wreckage of Krovak ships hung in space like a macabre art installation, a testament to the incredible power humanity had unleashed. On the planet's surface, the Cortex emerged from their bunkers and hidden bases, blinking in the unfamiliar light of a sky no longer filled with the fires of war. On the Zephyr's bridge, Nora surveyed her crew with a mix of pride and sorrow. They had accomplished the impossible, but the price had been steep. Too many good men and women lay in the makeshift morgue, their lives cut short by the cruelty of an uncaring universe. But even as she mourned, Nora knew there was no time for grief. The Krovaks had been beaten back, but not broken. They would regroup, reinforce, and return with a vengeance. The brief respite the Zephyr had bought with blood and fire was just that, brief. "Consul Zephyrin is hailing us, Captain," Mikhailov reported, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Nora nodded. On screen. The Cortex leader appeared, its normally serene features etched with lines of grief and gratitude. "Captain Vance, words cannot express our debt to you and your crew. You have saved not just our lives, but our very way of life. The Cortex will never forget this." Nora inclined her head respectfully. "We did what was right, Consul, what any sentient species should do in the face of tyranny and oppression. But your people must know this is not over. The Krovax will return." Zephyrin's eyes hardened with a resolve Nora had not seen before. "And we will be ready for them, Captain. Thanks to you, we have been granted a second chance. A chance to fight for our freedom. We will not waste it." As if on cue, the sensor console beeped urgently. Sato's eyes widened as he read the display. "Captain, I'm picking up warp signatures. A lot of them. But they're not Krovax." Nora frowned, turning to the view screen. "Show me." The image shifted, revealing a sight that made Nora's heart leap. Dozens of ships were dropping out of warp at the edge of the system, their sleek silver hulls gleaming in the starlight. They were of Cortex design, but unlike any Cortex vessels Nora had seen before. These were warships, their lines sharp and predatory, bristling with weaponry. Zephyrin's voice was filled with a fierce pride. "Behold, Captain, the Cortex Liberation Fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier, hidden away for generations, waiting for the moment to strike back against our oppressors. Thanks to you, that moment has come." Nora stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across her face. Perhaps things were not as dire as she had feared. With the Zephyr and the Cortex fleet fighting side by side, they might just have a chance. "It will be an honor to fight alongside you, Consul," she said formally. "Let us show the Krovax the true meaning of unity." Over the next hours, a flurry of activity engulfed the system. Cortex engineers swarmed over the Zephyr, repairing its damage with a speed and efficiency that left Nora's crew in awe. The ship's depleted ordnance was restocked, its reactor cores re-energized, its hull patched and reinforced. By the time they were done, the Zephyr gleamed like a newborn star, ready to rejoin the fray. And rejoin it did. With the Cortex fleet at its side, the Zephyr tore into the remaining Krovax forces like a wolf among sheep. The once unstoppable Krovax war machine faltered and crumbled under the onslaught, their command structure thrown into disarray by the unexpected resistance. In battle after battle, the Allies proved their mettle. Human ingenuity and resolve, combined with Cortex courage and determination, formed a bulwark against which the Krovax broke like waves on a shore. Slowly but surely, the tide of the war began to turn. The pivotal moment came in the shadow of the Krovax homeworld itself. In a daring raid, Nora led a strike team deep into the heart of the enemy stronghold. The Zephyr's jumped drive allowing them to bypass the formidable defenses. In a fierce firefight, they captured the Krovax leadership, crushing the head of the serpent with one bold stroke. With their command in disarray, the remaining Krovax forces scattered and fled, their unity shattered. It was a victory that would echo through the ages, a shining moment when two species, against all odds, stood together and changed the course of galactic history. As the last Krovax ship vanished into the void, Nora stood on her bridge, her uniform stained with blood and grime, her eyes alight with a fire that would never be quenched. They had won, not just for themselves, but for every species that yearned to be free. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated in her very bones, that this was just the beginning. The Zephyr and her crew had a new mission now, a higher calling. They would be the shield and sword of the oppressed, the beacon of hope in a galaxy too long shrouded in darkness. For they were human, and they would never, ever stop fighting for what was right. Forging an alliance. Word count, 1051. In the days following the defeat of the Krovax, a sense of cautious optimism settled over the galaxy. News of the Zephyr's incredible victory spread like wildfire, igniting hope in the hearts of billions. On worlds long crushed under the boot of Krovax oppression, the downtrodden and enslaved lifted their heads, whispers of rebellion rustling like wind through dry leaves. But none felt the change more keenly than the Cortex. Their leaders, so long focused on mere survival, now spoke of a brighter future, of a galaxy where their children could grow and thrive without fear. And central to every discussion, every plan and dream, was the name of their saviors: humanity. Nora found herself at the center of a diplomatic whirlwind, her every waking moment filled with meetings and negotiations. Representatives from a dozen species flocked to the Cortex homeworld, each seeking an audience with the legendary captain who had broken the Krovax yoke. It was overwhelming. At times, Nora was a soldier, not a politician. She was more at home on the bridge of her ship, staring down the barrels of enemy guns, than in the gilded halls of power. But she knew the importance of what they were building here, the fragile alliances and budding friendships that could reshape the very fabric of galactic society. And so she endured the endless talks, the posturing and pontificating, always keeping her eyes on the greater goal. A coalition of free worlds, united not by fear or force, but by shared values and common dreams. The linchpin of it all, of course, was the bond between humanity and the Cortex. What had begun as a desperate plea for help had grown into something far deeper, a connection forged in the crucible of war, tempered by shared sacrifice and sealed in blood. In a grand ceremony, broadcast across the galaxy, Nora and Consul Zephyrin signed the Cortex-Human Alliance Treaty. It was a moment of solemn joy, of two species committing to stand together against any threat, to defend not just each other, but the very ideals of liberty and self-determination. As the cheers of the crowd washed over her, Nora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For so long, humanity had hidden in the shadows, watching the galaxy with wary eyes, afraid to reach out lest they be bitten. But now, they had stepped into the light, and found not enemies, but friends, allies, brothers and sisters in arms. It was a heady feeling, one tempered by the knowledge of the challenges ahead. The Krovax had been defeated, but not destroyed. And they were not the only threat lurking in the vast darkness of space. There would be other battles, other wars. The price of freedom was eternal vigilance. But for now, in this moment, Nora allowed herself to hope, to believe that this was the dawn of a new era, a time when the diverse species of the galaxy could come together, not in conquest, but in cooperation. A time of exploration and discovery, of pushing back the frontiers of the unknown, not in fear, but in wonder. As the ceremony ended and the crowds began to disperse, Consul Zephyrin approached Nora, its eyes shining with an emotion that transcended species and culture. Gratitude, deep and profound. "Captain Vance," it said softly, "I once told you that the Cortex could never repay our debt to you and your crew. I see now that I was wrong. In your actions, in your courage and compassion, you have given us something far more valuable than our lives. You have given us hope, a belief in a better tomorrow. That is a gift beyond measure." Nora felt her throat tighten, humbled by the depth of the consul's words. "We only did what was right," she managed, her voice rough with emotion. "What any species should do for another. In the end, we are not so different, Consul. We all want the same things: to live, to learn, to grow, to be free." Zephyrin grasped her hand in its own, a gesture of friendship that needed no translation. "And thanks to you, Captain, we have that chance. The road ahead may be long and hard, but we will walk it together. Humanity and the Cortex, side by side." Nora nodded, a fierce determination filling her heart. Yes, the road would be hard. But for the first time in her life, she knew she would not walk it alone. None of them would. The lonely epoch of humanity's isolation had ended, replaced by something far more beautiful. Fellowship, unity, hope. As the sun set over the Cortex capital, painting the sky in hues of lavender and gold, Nora looked up at the stars, seeing them not as distant alien points of light, but as beacons calling to her, to all of humanity, to come explore, to come discover, to come build the future hand in hand with their new brothers and sisters of the stars. It was a call she intended to answer. Thus concludes the full 7-part story of The Zephyr's Gambit. I aim to weave together the themes of human resilience, unity, and hope that you requested, within an overarching narrative of first contact, war, and the forging of interspecies alliances. The story is told in a third-person perspective that puts the focus on the actions and decisions of Captain Nora Vance and her crew, while also giving glimpses into the broader galactic stage. Each part is a self-contained chapter of the larger story, progressing from the initial distress call to the climactic final battle and its aftermath.